All right, so get ready to dive into like a real head scratcher here.
Okay.
We're looking into an Asbury Respus,
Mm-hmm.
a serial killer from the early 1900s.
Wow.
Now, his story is anything but typical.
Okay.
You shared asburyrespus.pdf, an
Yes.
excerpt from his Wikipedia page.
Right.
And let me tell you, this case is full of twists and turns.
Interesting.
Prison escapes,
Oh, wow.
mistaken identities,
Really?
even a near lynching.
Oh, my gosh.
But here's the real puzzle. His victims were all over the map,
Okay.
from young to old, black to white.
That's what makes Respus such an anomaly.
Hmm.
Most serial killers have a type,
Right.
But his victim profile is surprisingly diverse.
Yeah.
It suggests that something other than a specific victim profile was motivating him.
Okay.
Maybe opportunity was a bigger factor.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
The source mentions his last name is spelled both Respus and Respass.
Right.
Seems like a small detail, but could it be significant?
It's definitely worth noting. Respass appears to be the more common spelling in North Carolina, where he was born.
Hmm.
These variations could point to family connections,
Uh-huh.
or maybe even attempts to hide his identity. You never know.
Fascinating. And then there's the whole question of Respus claiming a childhood head injury caused him to be mentally unsavable.
That raises the age-old question.
Yeah.
Was the injury a genuine factor in his crimes, or was it a convenient excuse?
Right.
The source mentions a visible indentation in his skull, but that doesn't automatically equal mental illness. It's a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
But we need to look at the whole picture.
So before his infamous prison break, Respus had already confessed to murdering 2 black women before 1912.
Right.
And another in Virginia around 1910.
These early crimes give us some insight into his methods.
Okay.
He used both shooting and blunt force trauma,
Mm-hmm.
which indicates a degree of adaptability.
Hmm.
But it's like he wasn't fixated on one specific way to commit these horrific acts.
Then there's the 1912 murder of Ed B. Wynn.
Right.
Respus was convicted, but only got a 15-year sentence,
Yeah.
which seems pretty light considering.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Only 6 months into his sentence, he was declared criminally insane and sent to a mental hospital.
Wow.
This raises questions about how criminal insanity was defined back then compared to now.
You'd think they wouldn't just send someone like that back to prison, right?
Well, they did.
Really?
And not long after, he managed to escape.
Wait, tell me more about this escape.
In 1916, Respus and 3 other inmates used a fake key to break out of the prison kitchen.
What?
They actually scaled the prison wall. Bloodhounds couldn't even track them down.
Wow.
It's a mystery what happened to the other escapees.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
It really does.
But after this daring escape, there's a shift in Respus's pattern.
Okay.
He kills Jenny Gill, his first white victim,
Mm-hmm.
in a house fire that was initially thought to be an accident.
This change in victim profile is a major turning point.
Right.
It could mean his motives were evolving,
Yeah.
or maybe he was intentionally trying to mislead investigators.
Then in 1920 comes the drowning of 4-year-old Robert Neil Osborne.
Yes.
It was assumed to be an accident
Right.
until Respus confessed to holding the boy's head underwater.
What's truly disturbing is that he later pretended to find Osborne's body.
Oh, wow.
That level of premeditation and manipulation is both fascinating and chilling.
It's like he was playing a twisted game with everyone.
Yeah.
And it gets worse. In 1925, he murders 82-year-old Eunice Stevenson,
Right.
stages it to look like a suicide.
Wow.
And an innocent man actually confesses.
That false confession really highlights the immense pressure to solve these cases back then.
Yeah,
And how easily justice could be miscarried,
right.
especially with the racial tensions of the time.
It's scary to think an innocent person could be punished for something they didn't do.
Absolutely.
And then there are the unsolved cases from 1929.
Okay.
John Henry Smith and Nellie Jones Ballantyre.
Right.
Could those be linked to Respus?
Well, the fact that these murders happened close to where Respus lived is a pretty big clue.
Yeah,
It's a strong lead that deserves more investigation, even after all these years.
right.
It makes you wonder how many other crimes from that era might be connected to perpetrators who were never caught,
Right.
or whose crimes were misattributed.
So many lives affected and for so long.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about the murder of Vera Leonard in 1931.
Okay.
This is the one that finally led to Respus being caught.
This case is particularly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
A 9-year-old girl walking to her school bus
Mm-hmm.
is brutally beaten, and then Respus tries to cover it up by setting fire to the scene.
It's hard to even imagine what that little girl went through. What did Respus say about his motive?
his story changed.
Really?
Initially, he claimed he intended to sexually assault her,
Mm-hmm.
but later denied it,
Wow.
saying he was in a drug and alcohol-fueled frenzy.
Huh.
It makes you question if he was trying to downplay the severity of his actions.
Trying to lessen his guilt, perhaps.
Right.
But thankfully, he wasn't able to get away with it this time.
No, his plan fell apart quickly.
Okay.
He was seen acting suspiciously near the crime scene,
Yeah.
and they found blood-stained clothes at his house that matched footprints found at the scene.
And then came the near lynching we mentioned earlier.
Right.
That must have been a chaotic scene.
Absolutely. A mob of 1,000 people demanding justice.
Wow.
It's a chilling reminder of the racial tensions of that time.
Yeah.
The authorities had to move Respus just to keep him safe from the mob.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly things could spiral out of control.
Yeah,
And sadly, 2 other black men were wrongfully arrested because of this.
that's right.
Right.
The source says the police admitted they didn't have much evidence against these men,
Mm-hmm.
but they were still arrested,
Wow.
probably to appease the mob.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they were released once Respus confessed.
Uh-huh.
But it's a stark illustration of how racial prejudice can warp the justice system.
Such a tragic example of how prejudice can impact innocent lives.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to the trial. Respus's defense team went for the insanity plea.
That makes sense given his history, right?
Right.
But the prosecution built a solid case against it.
Oh, what did they present?
2 of Respus's coworkers testified that they never saw any indication he was mentally ill. Plus, a mental health expert who had examined him numerous times also said he was sane.
So that defense didn't really hold up then. What about the jury's verdict?
It didn't take them long. Less than an hour to find him guilty of murder. Judge Thomas J. Shaw then sentenced him to death.
Wow.
And the execution date was set for January 8th, 1932.
But even with the trial done, there's still more to this story, isn't there?
Right.
He made some pretty startling concessions, right?
He did.
Yeah.
During questioning, Respus admitted to 7 other murders.
Wow.
And here's the thing. Until that point, authorities hadn't really considered him as a suspect in any other cases besides Vera Leonard's.
It's like he was holding on to this information,
Yeah.
waiting to reveal it at just the right moment.
Right.
What kind of details did he reveal in these confessions?
He talked about entering a spell
Okay.
where he felt an overwhelming urge to kill,
Mm-hmm.
often without a clear reason.
Wow.
He even compared himself to a dog having a seizure. It's chilling, but also very puzzling. He also said the murder of Vera Leonard was specifically due to drugs and alcohol,
Okay.
whereas he blamed the other murders on these so-called spells.
So was he truly suffering from some sort of mental breakdown, or was this just a way to justify his actions?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's something that continues to fascinate criminologists and psychologists today.
Right.
We may never know for sure.
And then there was the execution itself.
Right.
The source mentioned some interesting details. His last meal of sardines and crackers, the singing of hymns, and the fact that no one claimed his body.
There's a certain sadness to it all.
Yeah.
A man who committed such horrific acts, dying alone and forgotten.
It's a strange mix of emotions, isn't it?
It is.
On the one hand, you have the revulsion at his crimes.
Yeah.
But also a flicker of pity for the life he led.
It's a natural human response.
Right.
We're wired for both justice and compassion.
Yeah.
And the cases like this force us to confront both of those impulses.
Absolutely. We've covered so much ground here, but there's still this one big question looming over everything. Why?
Right.
What drove him to commit these terrible acts?
It really is the ultimate question.
The source points out just how unusual Respus's crimes were.
Yeah.
His victims were a mix of black and white individuals,
Right.
young and old. It's different from the typical patterns you see with most serial killers.
You're right. Usually there's a specific type they target.
Right.
But Respus seemed to choose his victims almost at random.
So what's the explanation?
That's the real mystery, isn't it? His
Yeah.
own explanations, those spells and the drug-fueled frenzy just don't seem to tell the whole story.
It's like we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Was there something darker at play?
Yeah.
Some deep-seated rage or twisted need for power?
And that's what makes this case so fascinating and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah.
We know so much about his actions, but that why remains elusive.
It almost feels like Respus himself didn't didn't fully understand his own motives. And all these years later, we're left trying to unravel this mystery.
It's a reminder that the human mind, especially one capable of such darkness, can be incredibly complex.
Yeah?
And sometimes, even with confessions and trials, the true motivations behind someone's actions remain hidden.
So why should we care about a serial killer from nearly a century ago? What does this all mean for us today?
Respus's story isn't just about one man's crimes.
Right.
It gives us a glimpse into a specific time and place,
Hmm.
a time marked by racial tensions, major societal changes, and a limited understanding of criminal psychology.
It shows how far we've come in areas like forensic science and criminal profiling,
Absolutely.
but also how much we still have to learn about the darker aspects of human nature.
Exactly. And sounds a final, thought-provoking question for you to consider.
Okay.
Given all the time Respus spent on the run between his escapes and captures, could there be more undiscovered victims out there?
That sends chills down my spine. You mentioned earlier how several unsolved murders could potentially be linked to him.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even when a case is officially closed, the impact of these crimes can reverberate for generations.
And it underscores the importance of continued research and investigation.
Right.
Even for cases that seem long forgotten,
Yeah.
we never know what secrets might be waiting to be unearthed.
This deep dive has definitely left me with a lot to think about.
Well, if you're interested in exploring further, I highly recommend looking into the history of serial killers in the early 20th century.
Okay.
Or delve deeper into the social and racial dynamics of the South during that era. There's a wealth of information out there waiting to be discovered.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the life and crimes of Asbury Respus. It's been a dark and unsettling exploration, but hopefully it sparked your curiosity and left you wanting to know more.
Remember, the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing process. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.